Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. This is part 2 of my Stanley Cup playoff preview. Part 1 featured me giving out my previews and predictions for the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, as well as picking my regular season award winners. Now, with his thoughts on the first round of the playoffs, as well as some other NHL offseason storylines, as well as his thoughts on the awards, is ESPN's John Buchacross. How's it going, John?
Going great. Best time of the year.
It is the best time of the year. You're doing the Frozen Four right now, right?
Yep, going to be in Buffalo all week long, all weekend long to finish up the college season and starting the same time as the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that's kind of a bummer because that takes some of the thunder away from us. But for a sports fan, it's a great week of hockey.
You're right. It is a great week of hockey. You're doing it with Barry Melrose, right?
Yep, our 7th year together doing the Frozen Four. So it's always the highlight of my year.
Yes. I do normally watch the Frozen Four. Before we go to the playoffs, is there any NHL prospects that you're intrigued by in this Frozen Four this year?
Certainly Cale Makar of UMass is the biggest one. He's a Colorado Avalanche draft pick, 4th overall. He might end up playing in the playoffs this year once UMass season is over here. Whether they win a national championship or fall a bit short, it'll be interesting to see if the Avalanche plug him right in. He's certainly good enough to play in the NHL right now. It's been a long year. Maybe they'll give him a break and start fresh next year. But he's the most talented college player in the game. And every team has a couple guys who will get a shot. And so it's good to see these guys now up close. And then when they make the league, I already know kind of who they are and their stories, so it helps me there. So it's always fun to see the future NHL players up close.
Yeah, it is. And I actually mentioned Makar as my wild card of that series when I did my preview and predictions because of the possibility of UMass's season ending and then him coming and joining the Avalanche immediately. And something else that I like to have fun with is the Bucci Overtime Challenge that you do during the playoffs. That's a lot of fun. That has all the fans on Twitter ramped up, and literally my whole Twitter feed is people picking the challenge winners, and even some of your coworkers like to participate in that as well. And I just think that's a lot of fun. So let's just go.
A lot of fun. Go ahead.
No, you could go.
Not to say we started that. We kind of played that little game a long time ago when ESPN used to have hockey games on our network, and we would just kind of do that to wait until the game ended. And I just kind of took it to Twitter one day, just as kind of a joke, a little lark. And I couldn't believe how much participation there was. And so it just kind of kept grew, and it's a lot of fun and trying to get some more people involved, give out some more prizes. So yeah, it's just a good way for the hockey community to come together and just it keeps the games a little more meaty if you have somebody to pick from. It's free gambling almost. It doesn't cost anything. So it's not like real gambling where you lose your money. This is the way it kind of heightens the experience, which is why people gamble. And but also so it heightens that overtime experience, and maybe you might win a T-shirt or something.
Yeah, I've won that a couple times. That's how you and I personally started chit-chatting on Twitter. I remember I won a few years ago, and I was just like, oh, I won the Bucci Overtime Challenge, and I remember my mom was happy for me. She's like, who's this John Buchacross? And I explained her the story and how I won. I think I have a T-shirt sitting in my drawer somewhere.
Well, you have to wear it for the playoffs. Yeah, I make a lot of new friends on Twitter because I have to ask people for their addresses so I can send them T-shirts and hats. And it's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll be out traveling for work and I'll see somebody with a shirt, or they'll come up to me and say, "I won this here," or "I did this." It's been a fun little way to make hockey friends. Hockey friends are the best friends, and it's been a fun experience.
Yeah, I love Twitter, and it's really how I've met a lot of people, throughout social media and even the ESPN and other broadcasters around the world and whatnot. So let's go with the playoff predictions. I'll start in the East. Columbus and Tampa is your matchup. To you, what's the key thing to this series?
Well, certainly it's Sergei Bobrovsky playing out of his mind. He hasn't done that in his career during the playoffs. It's something he's going to have to do. too. Columbus is certainly battle ready in terms of they've been playing for a playoff position, so they've been kind of in that mode. They don't have to turn it on where maybe Tampa Bay does. But I think Tampa Bay in certain times this year, they have sensed the big game, and they approached it that way, and they stepped up, very, very well. So it's going to be interesting to see if they have their A game right away. I imagine they will. They dominated Columbus during the regular season. I think they should be able to win this series in 5 or 6.
I actually predicted a sweep because I just think Tampa is just that good. It's a bold call, but I wouldn't be surprised if Columbus won a game or two because they have good players offensively. And then Bobrovsky to me is the wild card of this series because of his past playoff struggles. And under pressure in the series, I think John Tortorella, right?
Well, he's won the Stanley Cup before, certainly with Tampa, and so he has a bit of that swagger. And he'll let the guys go play, and he'll still do them with confidence. So I just think there's a bit too much of a talent gap there, especially in Columbus's bottom 6 forwards. If they were to get surprise scoring, maybe they could hang around. But, yeah, it's hard to sweep teams nowadays. But certainly, Tampa certainly could. They win 2 quick ones at home and then maybe win a close one in Game 3, and then suddenly they're feeling pretty good for a possible sweep. So I'll give Columbus one home game, and Tampa comes back and wins it 5. But I could see a sweep there as well.
Yeah, that should be an interesting series. And then John Davidson obviously is in the mix for that Rangers position. We'll get into that a little bit later on the podcast. The other side of the Atlantic Division, you have Boston and Toronto, 2 original 6 teams. Who do you like in that one?
Yeah, certainly the Bruins are the favorite in that one. They have a little more experience. They have a little more, obviously, playoff experience and a good mix of veterans and young players. Toronto's key players are still pretty young and not quite in full bloom yet, but they're still a very dangerous team because they can score. John Tavares certainly makes them a whole different team to win in the short term. That's why they went and got him. Otherwise, it would have been longer steps to get to a Stanley Cup final. But, they get great goaltending. Everything goes their way. They certainly have a shot, but they have the hardest road of any team in the playoffs. They have to beat Boston and Tampa Bay, assuming the Lightning win, neither with home ice advantage. That's the toughest first 2 games. So, obviously, that makes their cup chances less likely. But if they were to beat those 2 teams, suddenly they become a favorite. So, I like their young talent. It's excellent, and you just never know. They got a couple guys hot, and they can give Boston a problem. So that's close to a coin flip series with Boston having a little bit of an advantage.
I agree with you there. I took the Bruins in 7. I also wouldn't be surprised if this goes 7 and Game 7's in overtime like a few years ago. That was an absolute classic.
Yeah.
I remember Boston came back there a couple goals down. I remember Rangers and Capitals. I'm a Rangers fan, so I was watching Rangers Capitals. That game was over, and then NBCSN went to Toronto, Boston, and then Boston came back, and then Bergeron scored the winner. So that's one of my favorite hockey memories, just as a fan of how that comeback happened. Game 7 overtimes, they're always fun.
Yeah, that was one of the greatest moments in Boston Bruins history, that whole comeback. And yeah, that was epic. And the Bruins, I'm sure, would like to win another cup with this kind of core of players. It's nice to win 1, but man, if you can win 2, that kind of separates you from a lot of players. So for someone like, Chara and Bergeron and Marchand, that would be a big deal. They certainly have a team that's certainly good enough. And obviously beating Tampa, for them, it's going to be tough too. They might have to beat Toronto, Tampa, and Washington. That's a gigantic task, and they might be out of gas by then. So it's a tough road for the Bruins too.
Yeah, it's a tough road for a lot of teams, especially that Boston-Toronto winner, and then especially out west. I'll get to the west in a little bit. Sticking in the east, let's go to the Metro. Washington against Carolina. Carolina in the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Who you like in that one?
Yeah, I like Washington. They're certainly built to win again. The Michael Kempny injury is a big one. He was playing with John Carlson on the blue line and really helping Carlson have his best season this year. So that's a big loss for Washington. They were pretty much a complete team with him. So they'll try Nick Jensen there and see if he can work out. But this team is certainly, they're strong. They have good scoring depth. lineup. Three really good lines that can score. Their blue line, like we said, is solid. And so the coaching's inexperienced, but this is a team, I think it's a good draw for them to get Carolina, not an overly physical team. The team somebody's had a great year. Peter Mrazek's a hot and cold goaltender. He can look great, but then he can look terrible. So this sets up for Washington in 5 or 6. I'll probably go 6. We'll give Carolina the benefit of the doubt to maybe get a couple. It's hard to beat any team 4 in a row or 4 out of 5 even, but 4 out of 6, people. It sounds like it's not a dominating series win, but it's still pretty good. And so I'll say the Caps in 6.
I took the Capitals in 6 as well. Justin Williams obviously played for the Capitals, so you think he would have some revenge against his ex-team. And another thing, Jordan Staal in the playoffs for the first time in a long time. I heard somebody mention that. I think it was on the NHL Network the other day. But I like Carolina's young talent. That team deserves a lot of credit for being here. I agree with you there. And then obviously the Caps are the champions, so I took them to advance. And then the Islanders against the Penguins. Islanders obviously a huge surprise without John Tavares there. They make the playoffs, home ice in the first round. In Pittsburgh, obviously 2 of the last 3 Stanley Cups. Who you got?
Yeah, it's a tough, close series. The Penguins are a little bit of a favorite, but not a lot. Not as much as many people probably thought. Tough to score against the Islanders, but they're not a very dynamic offensive team. The Penguins have a lot of Stanley Cup champions, multiple Stanley Cup champions. I still think they have a pretty good amount of intensity and hunger. They don't have a great offensive team right anymore. It's a bit of a challenge for them to score, especially on the bottom 6 of their forwards. Don't quite have that wild card line they used to kind of have of guys like a Nick Bonino, guys like that. So it's going to be a tight series. I just can't imagine Sidney Crosby and the Penguins losing to this Islanders team. It could happen, but I'll stick with the Penguins, and this one might go 7. This could be a 7-gamer, so we'll take the Penguins in 7.
I took the Penguins in 6, but I won't be surprised if it goes 7. I like the Crosby Malkin. I just can't see them losing to the Islanders. And Murray over Leonard or Grice, whoever starts for the Islanders in net. So I like the Penguins there too.
I agree too.
Western Conference, you have the Flames as your 1 seed against your second wild card in Colorado. I like this series. This could be sneaky good. Who do you like here?
I like Colorado in that one. Getting good goaltending from Philip Grubauer. Nathan McKinnon's the best player on either team. It's good to have the best player. Certainly Calgary's a great offensive team, and Grubauer is going to have to be outstanding. But Calgary doesn't have great goaltending either. And like we talked about, Cale Makar, certainly Colorado could add him next week and to give them a jolt and some depth. And that could, sometimes that can kind of wake a team up a little bit. So, I'm going to take the Avalanche in this one.
I like the Flames in 6, but I don't feel good about it. I agree with you with the goaltending, especially Calgary. Mike Smith really hasn't been playoff tested, and their backup's pretty good, too. David Rittich, he's pretty solid as well. And I agree with you, Nathan McKinnon's the best player in that series, but I just think Calgary's depth prevails over Colorado with their big line with McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog. That's a good team in Colorado, but I just like the Flames. I'm going to take the Flames in 6 there. The other side of that division is San Jose in Vegas. That's your 2-3. Both these teams struggled down the stretch, but somebody has to come out of that. Who do you got?
In 4th. I think I'm going to settle on the Sharks now. They have a lot to play for. They have an inspirational factor in Joe Thornton. They have 3 really good lines. Obviously, Erik Karlsson and what he could provide possibly is a bit of a wild card. Vegas has had stretches of a very good team, and they certainly did well last year. But Montreal had more points than Vegas this year. They're not in the playoffs. So they've been up and down, a little bit cold down the stretch. So I'm going to say the Sharks are going to get this one in 7.
Sharks in 7, that wouldn't surprise me. This was a very tough series for me to pick. I settled on Vegas because they're getting Marc-Andre Fleury back, and the health of Carlson and some of the guys on San Jose is concerning. But it wouldn't surprise me if San Jose won that series. And it also wouldn't surprise me if the winner of that series went to the conference final. So that's something to look out for, too. Central Division, your winner of that was Nashville. The first wild card, Dallas. Obviously, these two teams are in the same division. Who do you like in that series?
I'm going to take Dallas in that one. I like their style of play. They become a bit defensive, but they certainly have dynamic offensive players up front. Jamie Benn was meant for the playoffs. Tyler Seguin is ultra-talented player. Alexander Radulov has been very, very good the last 2 months. One of the better wingers in all of hockey. Ben Bishop's a big goaltender should be in the final 3 for the Vezina. Dallas is a little under the radar. Nashville's been up and down. I'm a big fan of Pekka Rinne in the playoffs. So I'm going to take Dallas there.
I'm going to go with Nashville, but I'm not so super about it. You've talked me into Dallas a little bit, and then Don LaGreca was talking to EJ Redick on his podcast about Dallas, and it seems like both of those guys like Dallas too, but I'm going to take Nashville. Bishop has been nagging with some injuries, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the one thing with him. Is he would have to play every game in the series and be good. And like you said, that's asking a lot. He's back now, and he's been great when he's been in this year. Kudova's been a decent backup. But yeah, they need Bishop, and injuries are a concern with him to last. So they would need him for that entire series.
And yeah, to me, the difference in this series, I like the depth on Nashville's defense, and I'm not really sold on Dallas's depth offensively. I do love Ben and Seguin. They're going to put up their points, but I'm going to take Nashville in that series. And I won't be surprised if both backup goaltenders see time in the series. I'm just going to throw that out as a prediction.
Yeah, you might be right.
And then the last one I think is the best series in the first round, and that's St. Louis and Winnipeg in the Central Division. A lot of intrigue here. Who do you got in that series?
That's a tough one. Winnipeg is getting healthy. They're a very dynamic offensive team with multiple lines that can score, and Connor Hellebuyck hasn't had a great year. St. Louis is certainly going right now. They've been good for 3 months. They have a goaltender who's very confident. They got some high-level players as well, so I'm going to take St. Louis in that one. Again, a tough one to pick, but the Blues have been good for 2-3 months, and the Jets have it. So I'm going to ride the Blues momentum.
Oh, wow. A lot of people like the Blues. I'm going to go with the Jets, and it was a tough call. To me, it was whoever gets home ice was going to be my pick to win the series, so Winnipeg has home ice. And my thing with the St. Louis, Binghamton, my concern for him is that this could be the Hamburglar from 4 years ago. I remember Ottawa snuck in 4 years ago in the playoffs, and the Hamburglar led them there, and then he struggled in the playoffs. And I won't be that surprised if Jake Allen's seen in this series.
That's a pretty good call. That certainly could happen, and those first 2 games are key. St. Louis would probably need one of them, and Winnipeg's tough to beat there, and they'll come out flying, and Binghamton it's going to have to be awesome to hold them off.
Yeah, and I'm impressed with Binghamton. And Patrick Laine, I noticed this the other day, only had 50 points. And I believe he played in all 82 games this year, too. What's up with him?
Really, really weird. Had that one good month. Otherwise, he got like 1 goal in his last 18, and he went a month without scoring. It's very, very, very strange. Very, very strange. You shoot the puck better. I don't know what it is, but it's very weird. But he could go out and have a 6-goal series. So that's the thing. But again, you just don't know. If he doesn't, if he has a 0-goal series, then St. Louis has a chance. But of course, did he have 5 goals against St. Louis in a game this year? So maybe he's gonna feel pretty good playing the Blues.
I forgot about that. He had the 5-goal game. That was early in the season.
Yeah, it just popped in my head as I was talking. I just realized I kind of could see the highlights going in my head as I talked about that. Yeah, that was I think that was in November month when he had like 18 goals or something, but that was his only good month.
Yeah, that's very surprising. I really like Mark Sheffley. I think he's the best player on the Winnipeg Jets.
Oh, no doubt about it. top 10 player in the league. He's like Patrice Bergeron in terms of he can just do everything in the game, and he's one of the best players in the NHL.
Yeah, I think he's very underrated. I really, really like him. Who do you think ends up coming out of the East? Tampa?
Yeah, I think Tampa's enough of a favorite. The disparity that they showed in the regular season, those teams are the teams that usually, go on to win. They remind me of Chicago when Chicago was going on their run. The years they won the Cup, they were a top 3 goals for team and a top 3 goals against team. And so when you get that combination, that's a real juggernaut. You're not going to win every year, and Tampa might not win this year. They might win next year, but I think it is their time. I think they have the hunger factor, and besides the talent factor, besides the domination factor, so yeah, I really, really like their chances to get to the Cup final. I do think that the Eastern Conference, I think, will win the Cup again, whether it be Boston, Washington, or Tampa Bay.
I disagree with that from a standpoint of if Tampa gets picked off. Like, it wouldn't really floor me if the Central Division, whoever comes out of that, wins the Cup. That just wouldn't surprise me if, like, San Jose or the Blues or the Predators somehow won the Cup. Like, it just wouldn't surprise me, but I agree with you on Tampa. Who do you think comes out of the West?
I just don't think any team in the West can hang with the Bruins or Tampa Bay and even Washington. I think those are the 3 best teams in the NHL.
Yeah, Washington's pretty darn good, and then obviously Boston. I think Boston can give Tampa a series as well as Washington.
Yeah, they'll go 6 or 7 games, and if you happen to get... And Washington has a very good record against Tampa Bay the last 2 years. They're very comfortable playing them. I don't think the Bruins are, but Washington is. And certainly those will be 6 or 7 game series, and it could be a key injury, could be a fluky goal, and so that's why hockey is so difficult to predict. That's why it's so hard to win the Stanley Cup, because it's a 2-month season, and you got to stay healthy, you got to get great goaltending, and then you got to get those pucks to hit the post to go in and not out. And that's what happens all the time. We see the Penguins on a couple of their Cup runs. They're in Game 7 against Ottawa, and Ottawa hits the post. And Ottawa wins that game, and their season's over. And so that's what it's all about. It's just it's a game of inches in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
You're absolutely right, and I remember that Game 7 against Ottawa. Wasn't that a double overtime?
It was. That cost me about 20 Gucci T-shirts that night because it was a double overtime game. So that was an expensive postage game. But it was, Chris Kunitz, I think, was the one who got the winner. And Ottawa came very close, and that's why it's so hard to predict these things because, like you said, these games going to go. Some of these Game 7s might go to overtime, and everybody's good. They're all professionals. The goalie could make a mistake, and so it's tough to predict at that point. And if you're at Tampa Bay, of course, you don't want to get in that situation. You want to win these series in 5 or 6 games and not make it a fluky situation. Set yourself up so you can survive a fluky situation when you're up 3 games to 1 or 3 games to 2.
Who do you have in the West?
Yeah, man, the West is difficult. I like Vegas for most of the year, but like I said, I just don't see them playing enough consistent hockey to get there. I think it's just really difficult to find a team in the West who can really grab this thing and take it. I think you have to kind of look series to series and see what the matchups are. Because San Jose can get hot and healthy. I really kind of like their coaching and their makeup to get this done. People like Joe Pavelski, those are the kind of people you win with. Certainly Nashville has a nice group of players on defense. Philip Forsberg is an absolute high-level playoff performer. So was Victor Arvidsson. Is just made for the postseason. Nashville's not real strong up the middle. I wonder if they're one center short. We mentioned Winnipeg has just kind of been up and down. Can they really be hot for 2 months? So I think it's so difficult out there to pick a team. You mentioned Calgary off the top, but I kind of had a little upset there. If they ever got a goaltending house, I really like their toughness, and like you said, their scoring depth can be pretty dangerous. But like I said, I just like the Sharks coaching. They got enough superstars. If Carlson is hot for 2 months, he won't be playing for a big contract. He still has to prove himself a little bit, although someone will probably give it to him no matter what. So I'm still going to ride those Sharks.
That wouldn't surprise me. I think the Vegas San Jose winner, it wouldn't surprise me if the winner of that series made the final. it was a tough call for me. I'm going to go with the Predators because I just think Forsberg and Vreets, and I just love those guys. And then their depth on defense. Pekka Rinne, yes, he's had his ups and downs in the playoffs, but you got to ride with somebody to be hot in the West. I'll go with Nashville, although I won't be surprised if it's Vegas. I won't be surprised if it's San Jose, Winnipeg, or even St. Louis.
Yeah, you have to like Nashville's experience, the coach's experience. He's been to the Cup, a couple of times with different teams. Nick Bonino's won before. He knows how to win. You mentioned the defense. They have a hunger factor, trying to win cups for a bunch of guys on that team, for the city. That's always a good vibe to have when you haven't done something before. You can ride emotion. When you do things already, it's harder to ride emotion. Like the Penguins, they have to be more, certainly mechanical and play a certain. We got to get this done. It's hard to conjure up emotion that's not legit and real. And certainly a team like Nashville trying to win it for the city and for themselves. A lot of them, Peter Laviolette's already won it once with Carolina, so he's got lots of experience. So you got to like how battle-tested they are. Again, so they have enough scoring, multiple lines, where a team like Vegas and San Jose, and if Winnipeg got hot, Winnipeg could be one of those teams, too, that have multiple lines that can score. We had an offensive regular season. If we have an offensive postseason, you want to have multiple guys who can score.
Exactly. So I'm going to go with Tampa over the Preds as my Stanley Cup Finals pick. I'm going to say 7. I think that's just a bold call, and I just think Nashville's going to be hungry. And Tampa, you have to hit adversity at some point, but I'm going to say Tampa and 7 over the Predators.
You're right. Usually every team has adversity at some point, whether it's the first round or the second round or the last round. It's just not an easy trail to a playoff. Very, very often. Occasionally it is. Occasionally, when a team has home ice throughout, like Tampa, and they win their first 2 games in every series, and then they can control it. Or for some reason, if they split, they go win game 3. But yeah, you look at a lot of champions. They've been down 3 games to 1. I remember the Red Wings back in 2002. They were down 3 games to 1 to Vancouver in the first round. So then they plowed on through and ended up winning the Stanley Cup Final in 5 over Carolina. So, yeah, but you're right. There's usually at one point you're going to face a situation where you're down 2-1, down 3-2, and have to win a couple in a row. And that could happen to Tampa Bay at any point, really, in the playoffs.
Yeah, so I can't wait for the playoffs. Before we wrap up, regular season awards. Who do you like for the Hart Trophy?
I think Nikita Kucherov will win pretty easily the Hart Trophy.
I agree. Great year. 128 points is nothing to sneeze at. He has to win that, I think. What about the Vezina?
Yeah, the Vezina, I think his teammate, Andrei Vasilevsky, is the best goalie. It's kind of a tough year to pick a Vezina. You get guys with a lot of wins, a guy like a Ben Bishop, who I think really helped Dallas make the playoffs, really good numbers. Marc-Andre Fleury had a bunch of shutouts. He kind of held that team together while they were kind of wobbly. Then they found their way. Then he got hurt, and he kind of struggled here to finish the season. So it's kind of a tough end of the year. But I think Vasilevsky's going to win that as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Darcy Kemper of Arizona won that because he helped that team stay in the race after Antti Raanta got hurt. So that wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, he's not big. For not to be in the playoffs, that'll be tough. But certainly he could finish in the top 3, and that would be a big thrill for him.
Yeah, so that's probably the toughest word for me to pick. What about the Selke?
Selke's always difficult. I always said that it's really impossible unless you watch every single game of every single team. Everybody has a good Selke nominee, someone who's really living. I'll probably go with Ryan O'Reilly, though. He's had such a great year with St. Louis. Maybe their MVP. He's such a great all-around player. He does everything well. He can shoot it. He sets up his teammates well. He's a good face-off guy. Just really a good all-around season for a team that's really been cooking. Again, there's a guy you can take on almost every team to win the Selke, but I'll go O'Reilly.
O'Reilly's a good pick. I'd go with Bergeron. He just is a great all-around player for the Bruins, and I feel like he's won that award in the past, so it's easy to go with Bergeron.
Yeah, he could win every year. He's a future Hall of Famer. number retired in Boston kind of a player.
Yeah, I really like Bergeron. He's been a star for a long time in the league. How about the Norris Trophy?
Norris is tough too. No one really stands out. Again, Victor Hedman, best defenseman on the best team. Brent Burns, really powers San Jose in a lot of ways. Really like his aggressive play and the way he forces things and bringing the power play. He blocks shots. I like Brent Burns a lot. I would probably vote for Brent Burns.
I agree with you on Burns. He's had a great year. I believe he led San Jose in scoring or in points.
Right. That's something.
That is something. I know Carlson led Ottawa in scoring a lot when he was there as well. How about the Calder Award?
Yeah, I think Elias Pettersson's going to win Rookie of the Year. Led the league in scoring and really an amazing talent, better than I'm sure Vancouver thought. We saw his magic last year, but coming into the league, he knew he'd be good, but I don't think they realized he would be a high-level player right away. I'm sure that has them excited to accelerate their rebuilding plan and maybe can be better quicker because he's going to be such a high-level player even quicker. Dahlin certainly had a real nice year for Buffalo. He probably should be a top 3 guy. And Binnington, I think, does deserve to be a top 3 Rookie of the Year guy. I think he played enough games and wasn't big enough of a difference for a team at the most difficult position for a young player to play.
I agree with you about Pettersson. He really ignited the Canucks fan base and that team. That's a franchise guy in my mind. And then the last one that we haven't done yet was there's one more award. Oh, the Coach of the Year, the Jack Adams.
Yeah, I always say you give the Coach of the Year to 16 teams. The 16 teams who make the playoffs. They all have different players, different systems. It's really, not going to say a silly award, but trying to pick a Coach of the Year when, like I said, the job is to make the playoffs, and 16 teams do, and they all have different challenges. And so usually it just comes to some sort of, who deserves it, whether from a career perspective or whatever. And certainly John Cooper, with all of his talent and the way they really dominated and his way to keep it interesting and keep the guys up and deal with a few injuries here or there, not a lot. But, it's probably his to win. But, again, it could be Barry Trotz, what he did to the Islanders. Bruce Cassidy, what he did for the Bruins and bringing them along. It's just every team, every coach does a great job who makes the postseason.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Trotz. I did not think the Islanders were going to be a playoff team after losing John Tavares, and then Trotz leaves Washington and goes there and takes them to the playoffs, and they have home ice in the first round. I really am impressed with Trotz. To me, he's the easy winner. Honorable mentions to Claude Julien from Montreal. I didn't think Montreal was going to be any good, but they, like you mentioned before, how Montreal had more points than Vegas, and they're not even in the playoffs. Claude Julien deserves a lot of credit for what they did. Billy Peters in Calgary deserves some credit. You mentioned Cooper before. And Rick Tochin in Arizona, I think, deserves some credit as well for keeping the Coyotes somewhat relevant in the West.
Yeah, Tochin would be a good final 3 guy for me. Rod Brindamore, how he brought Carolina along and let them kind of play and stay out of the way. So, yeah, it's going to be tough to pick a final 3 between Cooper, Trotz, Tochin, and Brindamore. Those 4, I think, really impressive. So there's going to be, like I said, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 coaches who probably really deserve to be top 3 or just aren't going to get in there.
Yeah, so that's going to probably be a fun award to keep an eye on. I really think Trotz is going to win that. A few quick hits. Joel Quenneville to the Panthers after they let go of Bob Uecker. This hire makes sense because of his connections with the ownership there and Dale Tyon, the GM there in Florida, right?
Yeah, he was with Dale Tallon in Chicago for a bit, and I mean, Joe Quenneville's a Hall of Fame coach. He's won wherever he's gone. Cups, obviously, in Chicago, but Florida's just been very disappointing. I pick them to make the playoffs just about every year because of their talent, and they just disappoint me. Maybe some of that talent, especially on the back end, is overrated. They've never had a goalie, so they'll have to get a goalie. Maybe there are some assurances that Sergei Bobrovsky will be there, or maybe they have somebody else in mind, but they need a goalie. They probably need to, trade maybe even a couple other guys who've been there. They did that this year with Bukestad, kind of get some fresh blood. But maybe they'll give this group a chance. Add a defenseman. Maybe Panarin will want to play for Quenneville. He enjoyed it in Chicago. Maybe they could add Panarin and Bobrovsky and Quenneville, and certainly they would be an instant playoff team.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that plans out. You mentioned Bobrovsky and Panarin. I was going to ask you if you thought they were the front runners for them now, because the obvious ties with Panarin and Quenneville, and then Bobrovsky has ties with Chris Pronger, who's the assistant GM in Florida because of their days with Philadelphia. So I think they're certainly the favorites for Bobrovsky, but Panarin maybe.
Yeah, Panarin, Russians love to go to Miami. They love the weather down there. They grew up in crappy weather most of their lives, and if they have a chance to go to tax-free Florida in terms of state tax and get some great weather, certainly. But Panarin, I could see him going back to Chicago, play with Patrick Kane. I could see him go to New York City and be a part of the Rangers. Maybe LA's too much of a rebuild for Panarin unless they win the lottery. I could see him going to a big market, likely, like I said, LA, Chicago, New York, or certainly down there in Florida in the Miami area.
Yeah, so that should be an interesting one to watch. You mentioned the lottery. We'll get to that in a couple minutes. Buffalo gets rid of Phil Housey. Todd McClellan's there now. I thought that Buffalo was going to go after Quenneville, but instead Quenneville goes to Florida, and then Buffalo has to settle on McClellan. What are your thoughts on that hire?
Yeah, I think just Quenneville with his age and his family, Florida makes more sense from a weather standpoint, from a tax-free standpoint. A lot of money, so obviously being a resident in Florida, that becomes, you don't have to pay taxes in the state. New York State has its high state taxes along with its federal tax, so he'd be losing half of everything. So that makes a little more sense. Buffalo's not officially with McClellan, or did that happen today? I missed it, or I know there's been a rumor there.
Oh, it may have been just a rumor. I saw those two linked, so I thought that was a done deal. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think it's a done deal. His son is actually playing in the Frozen Four this week for Denver, so that's kind of interesting. He can kind of kill two birds with one stone maybe in Buffalo this weekend. But I know he might be up for the Los Angeles King job as well, because they need a coach. And He's been out on the West Coast before. We'll see what he prefers and who he thinks might be closer to winning. But the Pagulas, the owners treat their employees very well, so I'm sure he'll be impressed with what they have to say and the direction they want to go in. But I'm surprised after Edmonton didn't work out that he would get an opportunity so quickly.
Yeah, and then another coaching change. You mentioned Los Angeles. They got they axed their intern head coach Willie Desjardins. He's not coming back. McClellan does make sense for LA because, like you said, he's a West Coast guy. So that would make sense. How about Philadelphia?
Yeah, I would think they would stick with their guy, Scott Gordon. I thought he did a pretty good job. The goalie's up. He looks like the real deal. They're a young team. They continue to develop. It's a good free agent destination. Players will go there and sign. So unless there's someone they're really targeting out there, and they see holes in the current coaching staff, I don't know why they wouldn't just stay with what they have. But again, there could be someone they had in mind all along. Wait till after the season so he becomes available, whoever that may be. And but otherwise, I would think they would stay the course.
Yeah, Gordon did do a good job there. They were back in the playoff mix for a little while there, and then they faltered later on in the season. Ray Shero got extended with the Devils. John Hines is somebody that's been with the Devils for a while. Do you think his job's in jeopardy?
Yeah, that's they're slowly adding assets. They're going to add another good player with being back in the draft and lottery. They can sign Taylor Hall, keep him around, and continue to build around him. They'll slowly add assets. Yeah, Hines has gotten plenty of chances. We'll see what they do here. I could see bringing him back again and giving him one more shot. There were some injuries this year. There were some stuff they had to deal with, and they still have a goalie issue, obviously. Like any team, Corey Steiner really one style when they probably didn't see that coming a couple of years ago. So they still have a bit of issues there. But I would think Shearer's a pretty patient guy from where his lineage is, and unless he sees something markedly better, he'll stay the course.
Yeah, I think Shero's done a great job in New Jersey. And Hines, yeah, like you said, he's been there a while, and they had some injuries. Obviously, Hall was hurt most of the year, and they have to get him signed if they want to build around him. So that should be an interesting team to watch in the offseason. Another team in that area is the New York Rangers. Glenn Sather steps down as the president. Do you think John Davidson, do you think it's his job to lose?
I would think if he wanted it and they want him, well, obviously he'd be the guy. But it would be tough for him to say no. Those are his hockey roots. Leading the cup in New York, they know they have all the assets. They'll be able to attract free agents. They'll be able to sign college free agents because college free agents normally like to play in big cities. It's a little more exciting to them. Like a lot of young people, they want to live in big cities. And so it does make sense in a lot of ways. They do have a pretty good front office group of people already. They certainly could elevate someone like a Chris Drury or somebody to that position and stay young and stay with the kind of a group they have. Or they can look for Davidson to be that veteran influence. He's a uber people person. There's not a better people person than John Davidson. And like you said, he has Ranger roots going back to his broadcasting days and his playing days. So it would make a lot of sense for him to do his final chapter, unless he's just completely in love with Columbus and enjoys that experience. Not a lot of pressure as much as it'd be in New York. But yeah, it makes sense that if he wants it, I would think he'd be the guy.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Davidson didn't get this job. Steve Yzerman, do you think he's going to the Red Wings?
That's a tough one. I know he's enjoyed his time this year, but I know he likes being a GM. He likes making trades and that whole construction of a roster. Kenny Holland has done a good job in this rebuild. If they get lucky in the lottery, they could really make a move. I think they'll still be somewhat of a free agent destination place. It's a great hockey city, new arena. So certainly, again, if Steve Yzerman wants the job and he somehow lobbied for it, my guess is he would get it. It could make Kenny Holland kind of transition for him into a kind of an assistant role where he can help support Yzerman, extend his contract, maybe give him a little less money. That could be a good way for him, take a little pressure off him, and start enjoy his semi-retirement days. I could also see that happening. So I would think one of those two things will happen.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting one, too. Last thing, you mentioned this several times on the podcast. The lottery's tonight, 8 o'clock on the NBC Sports Network. Jack Hughes is the big prize. Do you think he's going to be the franchise player that people think he is going to be?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a really, really, really good player. Will he be a Crosby, McDavid? Probably not quite, but I think he's a really, really good player who will play in the league right away. Might take him a year or two to really take off, but he'll be an impact guy right away. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a Clayton Keller out in Arizona. Again, maybe just a notch up in terms of point production, defense, again, where he goes and what kind of line mates he has early in his career. We see how important it is. And with Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid, it's not a one-player team league. You got to have a good roster. So a lot of it will depend on that for Hughes. But if a team like Detroit or Buffalo can win it, he can slot behind Jack Eichel or even LA, slot behind Anze Kopitar. That's a good way to break into the league for him. If he can go to a team that already has a Hall of Fame caliber center like Buffalo, like Edmonton, like LA already, that could really do wonders for his career. But yeah, no, he's destined to be great. He is a lot like Johnny. I could see him like a Johnny Gaudreau, just not real big, but fast brain and fast hands and fast feet.
Yeah, and the big thing tonight is that Ottawa had the worst record in the league. Colorado has their pick because of the Matt Duchene trade. So imagine if Colorado wins the lottery, they would have McKinnon and Hughes in their lineup.
Right. That's a good point. It's another team, and they have an 18% chance to get him. That would be a great team for him to go to slot in that number 2 center. And they can either put Rantanen or Landeskog with him, then they can split up that big line and try to give each of those lines another in. Then you have Cale McCarr of UMass who will join them next year. So Colorado's really on the upswing.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Well, this was fun. So, when's your next appearance on SportsCenter?
Well, the Frozen Four this week, and then a couple days off to recuperate from that, and then I'll be back on SportsCenter a week from Wednesday. So it's going to be a lot, and then we'll be full steam ahead with Stanley Cup playoffs and Bucci Overtime Challenge and all that. So it's a real busy 2 months for me, especially next month or so with all these multiple games each night. Have to keep an eye on all of them.
Exactly. All right. Thanks for doing this, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.